It's helpful to users who are only interested in a very small subset of the cube. However, you can't use them for security. It's only a better browsing experience tool. So there's no security implementation you can do around a perspective. You can't say only show these people this. You can do it through a different way, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but perspectives are only used to filter down one large cube into smaller pieces that you can browse easier. And then let's switch over. I'm going to switch back and forth between our PowerPoint presentation here and our actual environment. So in this environment, I have internet sales, so AdventureWorks. We all love it, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, and I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to my Zoom It on this machine, so I apologize in advance. It disappeared somehow. But I'm going to try to kind of keep it as easy as possible to follow. But in my internet sales table here, up in the top, in the middle part, I have a couple of sections. I have a roles. We're going to go over that a little bit later. And then to the right of that, I have a little tile called partitions. And it's right in the middle of my page. And if I click on it, it's going to give me all the different partitions that I have. And what I can do is I can partition this analysis services table up. So that way, instead of having to process everything every day when I do my nightly processing, I can only process what's new. So you could almost use it. It's very useful for processing only new data. If I have data from 2005, for example, chances are my table is probably not modifying very much every day, right? Like my data from 2005 is pretty static. It's not really moving very much, and I'm pretty confident that that's where it's going to stay. So maybe I don't process that partition every day. I only want to process that like once a month or once a quarter. And what I can do is I can break that up so that when I'm doing my nightly processing, I'm only processing the current data that's more volatile in nature. And to create my partition, to start, one second. Let's see what's going on here. All right. No services either. This machine is just all over the place today. All right, so we're going to scroll down here, and we're just going to turn on our SQL Server service. Sorry about that, guys. Not sure why it's deciding to be difficult. There we go. All right. I should fix that issue. So as I open up my partitions here again, over on the right, I have a table. Zoom, it's killing me. I have two options. I can either table bind my partition, or I can SQL bind my partition. And to SQL bind my partition, all I need to do is I just need to click on the little icon called SQL, and I can modify my query to only pull in what I specify. So I can put a where clause. In this case, we're ordering by the order date, or we're partitioning by the order date. So I can say I only want to see orders in this partition where it's between 2005 January 1st and 2005 December 31st. Now I need to be really careful if I'm going to implement this because I don't want to kind of double hit myself. So if I'm going to say where order date is less than or equal to 2005 12/31, I need to make sure that the next one, I either say it's greater than 2005 12/31 or it's, use the next day, 2006 01/01. If you include the same date in there, it's going to put that same data point in both partitions, and instead of counting it as 1, it's going to count it as 2. So you want to be careful in regards to that when you're creating it. But overall, it's a really great way to narrow down your result set so when you're processing. So you can see in this table we have a 2005 partition, and 2006, and 2007, so on. We're pretty much partitioning this one by year. But now when we're doing our nightly processing, the only thing we're going to update every night is our current data. So we're just going to do, in this case, 2010. So our 2010 data is what we're going to process every night because that's what's highly volatile. But let's say we have 1 billion rows in a cube, and we're only getting maybe 100 million a night, we don't have to process all billion rows a day. We can only process the million or so that we have. So partitions are a very nice way to speed up performance very quickly. If you're having problems with an analysis services cube just processing overnight, check into the partitions. Regardless of whether it's multidimensional or tabular, a lot of times you can get some significant performance improvements just by creating partitions out. And, whoa, I'm so sorry, guys. So now that I just went through the demo for partitions, we'll go through perspectives next. But I'm going to cover the partitions slide real quick here. Partitions allow large tables to be split into smaller pieces, so we don't have to reprocess the entire table like we're just saying. It improves performance, and one big rule with tabular is that you can only process partitions for multiple tables in parallel, but you can't process tables for the same table in parallel. So what that means is if I have multiple partitions across, say, 3 different tables, I could process one partition from each of those 3 tables together, but I could never process all 3 partitions in the same table at the same time. A big rule of partitioning as well is that if you're using DirectQuery mode, which we'll go over a little bit later, you can only have one partition per table. So since you're removing analysis services kind of completely from the equation, you're actually doing all that partitioning at the relational level, and we'll go over that a little bit later as well. But I am going to go back and go over perspectives because apparently I am just all over the place this morning. But if I come into my tabular database again, and over towards the left, right next to where I'm going to create my new connections and bring in my import from data source, I get this field up called perspectives. And in my perspectives, I've got a couple of different options here. I can see, here's a list of all my tables over here on the left-hand side. And as I expand it, I can see here's each of my columns that I have. So I can actually take this down to the attribute level. I could say in the employee perspective, I want to make maybe name style available to this perspective, but I don't want middle name to be available in that perspective. And I can do that all the way down with everything that I've got, with every table, every attribute that I have.